Good morning, children. Now let's continue with the second part of the 8th lesson in geography, economy and occupations. Now in the previous lesson, we had studied about the various types of economies like the capitalist economy, the socialist economy, then we had studied about the mixed economy, okay, then communism, etc. Okay, now here we are going to do a study about the gross national incomes, okay, together from from the year 1960 to 2016. So here is a graph which shows the gross national incomes of three countries: Brazil, India, and the USA. Okay, this is from 1960 to 2016. So on the x-axis, we have the years plotted, and on the y-axis, we have the gross national incomes in million US dollars. Okay, so the blue color is for Brazil, the pink color, okay, rather is for India, and the green color is for USA. Okay, now which country's national income was highest in 2016 and how much was it? So look at the year 1916. Okay, so from this graph you'll find that the gross national income of USA was the highest. Okay, so which country's national income was the highest in 2016 and how much was it? Okay, so you'll find it is roughly say more than 1,800. Okay, so the USA's national income was the highest in 2016 and it was more than 1,800 million US dollars. Comparing India and Brazil, which country has a higher national income in 1980? Okay, so look at the year 1980. You'll find both India and Brazil have more or less the same national income. Okay, so both the countries, that is Brazil and India, have the same national income in 1980. Third one, comparing India and Brazil, which country has a higher national income in 2016? Okay, now in 2016, so look at the year 2016. When you compare India with Brazil, you find India has more. Okay, the gross national income of India is more. So third one, comparing India and Brazil, which country has a higher national income in 2016? India has a higher national income in 2016. What's the difference in the GNP of Brazil and India in 2016? Okay, so look at the graph here in 2016. Okay, now you'll find that there is a difference of 10 million US dollars. Okay, so the difference in the GNP of Brazil and India is roughly around 10 million US dollars. Calculate the difference between the national incomes of developed and developing countries in 2016. Okay, now here the developed country is of course USA and developing countries are Brazil and India. Okay, so if you're taking the you'll find the difference. First you'll have to take the difference between USA and India, and then you'll have to take the difference between USA and Brazil. Okay, so you'll find there is just a difference of say 1680. Okay, in case you take Brazil, you find the difference between the national incomes of USA and Brazil is 1680, and the difference between say India and USA is 1690 million US dollars. Okay, now let's come to GNP. What is GNP? GNP stands for Gross National Product, and it is the estimate of the total value of all the final products and services turned out in a given period by the means of production owned by the country's residents. Okay, so GNP actually is just a rough estimate. Okay, it is an estimate of the value of all the products and services which are produced by in a given period by the country. Okay, GNP is commonly calculated by taking the sum of the personal consumption, expenditures, private domestic investment, government expenditure, net exports, and any income earned by residents from overseas investments minus the income earned within the domestic economy by foreign residents. Okay, so how is GNP calculated? Okay, here GNP is calculated by taking the sum. See, personal consumption is there. Okay, individual's consumption, then expenditures. Okay, then we have private domestic investments are there by private as well as by domestic investment. Then apart from this, we also have the expenditure of the government, then the exports, that is the materials or say commodities which are exported, as well as the income which is earned by people from overseas investment. There are people who invest outside in foreign countries. So you're going to add up all this with, and then you're going to subtract it from the income which is earned within the domestic economy by foreign residents. So here foreign residents also are investing in India. Okay, so you're going to subtract that from the domestic economy by foreign residents. Okay, next is GDP. Okay, now GDP is the total value of the goods and services produced in a country. So GDP stands for the total value of goods and services which are produced. Now, the GDP is an economic indicator and it tells us about the economic health of the country. That is, whether a country is developing or whether a country is underdeveloped or whether it is a developed country. Okay, so GDP is an economic indicator which tells us how much developed a country is. For low income and middle income countries, high year-on-year GDP is essential to meet the growing needs of the population. So, in the case of say low income as well as middle income countries, there has to be an increase in GDP every year because this is needed to meet the needs of the growing population. Hence, we find the GDP growth rate of India is an essential indicator of the country's economic development and progress. So, GDP is actually an indicator. Okay, it's a measure which tells us about the growth rate of a country. And it will tell us about whether there is economic progress, whether there is economic development in a country. So, you find the GDP is an economic indicator. Now next we move on to the sectors. We have in an economy, we have private sector as well as a public sector. So what is a private sector? Now the private sector is the part of the economy that is run by individuals and companies for profit and is not state controlled. Okay, so private sector is run by individuals, by companies for the sake of profit and it is not under the control of the state. Therefore, it encompasses all for-profit businesses that are not owned or operated by the government. So, a private sector is not operated by the government and it includes all the business, okay, which are carried out for the sake of making profit. Next is a public sector. In the public sector, business and other organizations are owned and run on behalf of the public, either by the government itself or by organizations which are funded by and report to the government. So, what is a public sector? Now, in the case of a public sector, we find all the business, okay, business, etc., activities, etc., are owned or they are run on behalf of the public. They are either run by the government or certain organizations which are funded by the government. And these organizations have to report to the government. Public sector business is not generally run for profit, but exists to provide goods and services to the public using public funds. So, public sector business makes use of public funds. And generally, we find it is not run for the sake of earning profit, but it is run to provide goods and services, essential goods and services to the public. Okay. Now, next is we here have certain sectors. Okay. And these are certain sectors like banking, railways, airways, electricity production, iron and steel industry, health, education, telecommunications, etc. Now, on the right hand side, we have Brazil, and we find here they have already given us whether these sectors are owned by the public as well as by the private sectors. And here we are now going to find out or we are going to answer how it is in India. Now, the banking sector, for example, here in Brazil, it is run both by the private as well as public sectors. In India also, of course, it is run both by the private and public sectors. What about railways? Railways too are both run by the, here in India, it is run by the public sector. Okay, in Brazil, it is run by the private and public, but in India, it is run by the public sector. Now, airways. Airways in India is run by the public sector, but more by the private sector. Electricity production in Brazil, it's largely public. In India, also it is run both by the private as well as by the public sectors. Iron and steel industry. Iron and steel industry is run in Brazil. It is largely public sector, but in India it is run both by the private as well as by the public sectors. Health. In Brazil, it's run both by the private and public sectors, and in India too, it is run both by private and public sectors. Education. In Brazil, it is largely public and little private. In India, it is run both by the public as well as private sectors. What about telecommunications? In Brazil, it is private as well as by the public. In India, it is by the public and more by the private sectors. Okay, so children, we'll continue with this lesson. Now, in the next sector, we'll be studying about economy. We'll be studying about the various sectors like the, based on occupation, like say the primary, secondary, tertiary, as well as quaternary occupations. Okay, so just go through this lesson. Okay, thank you.